Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another fantastic webinar we've got ahead of us for Natural Medicine Week. And this is going to be all on mold illness and mold sensitivity from our wonderful ambassador, Amina Eastham. And Amina is a naturopath, nutritionist, and herbalist, and comes with a wealth of knowledge and many years as well in this particular field. So Amina, thank you so much for joining us today for the Natural Medicine Week webinar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Over to you. Ready for our wonderful webinar?
Thank you. I'm very excited to be presenting this, as it is a topic that I do see a lot. And I think it's one of those sort of illnesses that go under the radar a lot. Okay, especially in countries like Australia, where we do get a lot of dampness and the weather and so forth. I'm sure everyone's exposed to mold at some point. Okay, so here, this is what happens when people get told sometimes it's mold, right? When you're all buckling up or you're sitting comfortably, because we've got a lot to go through, but it is a bit of a roller coaster, and it can be fast. And it's like there's so much information once you start realizing the complexities of how mold can actually affect our bodies. Okay, so we're going to just go with the overview. So what exactly is mold? Well, we're going to talk about the mold sensitive patient. We're going to talk about why it's an increasing concern. Where do we start? And testing mycotoxins and what they are. I'll explain that in a little minute. Medical approaches and how, as a naturopath, I would look at treating someone that may have mold illness, and some home care advice for you. So what is mold? It's a fungi. It's not a plant. It has these little hyphae, like little spores on the end of the mold. And sometimes they can literally grow overnight. When they're combined, like the whole sort of study of fungi and mushrooms is the mycelium. The mold toxins are the bit that gets into our lungs that can be really aggregating to the body. So they are the mycotoxins, and they're the dead bits of mold that float around in the air that you can't necessarily see, but they get into, we breathe them in, they get into our skin. We'll eat them on food. And so these are the things that actually cause the real problems within the body. Myco means fungal as well. Mold sensitivities are basically something that I think are really becoming a big problem now, especially if you're exposed to mold in your house for a long period of time, or in your workplace, and you may not necessarily see the mold. A lot of mold is actually airborne, and you can't actually notice it. You can't see it, you can't smell it. So don't just think that it's the black mold that you see growing up along the walls. Who's affected by mold? There's quite a few different types of, inflammatory type illnesses, and sometimes it's been coined and given certain names like chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Patients that have chronic infections like Lyme disease, a lot of the patients that I treat, that's an area I specialize in. Patients with chronic viruses like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, where the immune system's a little bit run down. These are the types of people that are going to be more affected by mold. Any patients with compromised immune system problems. This is including patients that might have been on a lot of antibiotics. And just out of interest, 25% of people have genes, HLA type genes, that mean that they are susceptible to mold compared to everybody else. Whereas, say, in a household, 1 in 4 would be massively affected. But genetically, the other 3 people might be okay. Doesn't mean they're not going to get affected. Patients that have this MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, that's where people react to things like histamine. Those types of patients are going to be a lot more sensitive to mold. And as I mentioned, the people with the HLA type gene variations, especially patients that are more prone to celiac and gluten intolerance, they're usually the patients that have the kind of gene variations that mean they're going to get affected more by mold than other people in the family or in the household. Of course, anyone living in water damaged buildings, this could be a water damaged car. It only needs one time for your car to get flooded, and that mold sort of builds up, and then it's just there, it's circulating within that space that you're in, and you're breathing it in all the time. And patients that have chronic stress, these are patients that their adrenal glands are going to be continually on the go. So they're always going to be in fight or flight response. And what happens then is our body naturally, our adrenal glands naturally produce a whole bunch of inflammatory markers like, cortisol, cortisone, adrenaline, ephedrine, those types of neurotransmitters as well. But the steroidal type hormones will cause a lot more inflammation. So when the body's stressed, you're more likely going to be receptive to getting infected by things with like mold, viruses, bacterial infections. So it has become a worldwide concern because, I mean, we've got a lot of floods, there's a lot of water damage, a lot of things. Plus, the buildings we live in, they're not really conducive for airflow a lot of the times. We have aircon, which is continually going, and it's just blowing out the same mold spores. And like I said, a lot of the time you can't see these mold spores. So we've got flooding, we've got climate changes. Modern houses are, it's just really, really toxic in a lot of ways. Like gyprock, for example, mold will get into the gyprock and it uses it as an energy source, and it literally will thrive like, I guess, like a sugar almost. A lot of paints in houses now have got anti-mold agents added to them, but what happens is the mold becomes super mold, like when antibiotics make bacteria resistant. It's like that with mold. So, and the mold sprays, the antifungals that are sprayed on plants and all the food we eat now, their molds, they're actually receptive, they become resistant to that. So we are exposed to a lot more than we think. Potting mixes are just terrible for, if you've got it getting into the garden, those potting mixes, when you open the bag, full of mold. So you're really best wear a mask or don't do it, get someone else to do it, or make sure that you aerate it in a space that your head's not right in there. And patients that have a lot more allergies are going to be a lot more affected generally. Immune compromised patients, as I mentioned. So where is the mold? It can be anywhere. It can literally be anywhere, on the ceiling, behind the bed, under things. In Australia, I know any leather things, any leather boots, jackets will go moldy through the winter. And it can just happen in just a couple of days. And like I said, airborne, you wouldn't even notice sometimes. Leather is a shocker for collecting mold. This cake, it was interesting. I had some patients and they said, oh, no mold in our house, not at all. And they said, oh, actually, remember the cake? And they'd had a birthday party, left some cake out. That next morning, they'd seen these mold, like these hypho mold, little lines of fungus growing on the cake just in the night. So basically the mold spores had been in the air. They go to the cake because they all need feeding. We're all trying to survive here. So they use the sugar for their energy. So the symptoms of mold illness, there's so many. Doesn't mean that if you have some of these, you have mold illness, but these are ones to look out for. Fatigue causes a lot of inflammation in the brain. A lot of inflammatory markers will cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain and cause inflammation in the brain. It actually shrinks the hippocampus part of the brain, which is for memory, focus, concentration, and can enlarge the amygdala, make us more stressed. Brain fog, concentration problems due to the inflammation, of course, asthma, coughs, cold like flu symptoms, sinus congestion, prone to ear infections. So a lot of the upper respiratory type symptoms, allergies, sore eyes, lots of chemical sensitivity. So if someone is more prone to chemical sensitivities, it's something worth checking. What is it that's triggering them? Is it mold? Is mold one of the factors? Sensitivity to light, sound, smells, all of those kind of things, and a lot more neurological symptoms. So tingling, eye flicking, neuropathy, little pins and needles in the hands, Raynaud's syndrome, where the hands get really cold and sort of veiny, and neurodegenerative symptoms where they're getting shooting pains, or maybe just that can coincide with brain fog, that kind of thing. Cold temperature intolerance. A lot of patients that have mold illness have a more of a hypothyroid type activity, so that affects the metabolism and the temperature control of the thyroid. Muscles, weakness, pains, joint pains, electric shocks and static, funny tingling things, vertigo, lots of gastrointestinal symptoms. Anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's symptoms, as it can affect the brain, like I said, causing brain inflammation. So Alzheimer's, this is just an interesting study if you feel to look at a little bit more information about different types of Alzheimer's, and just showing that it has been a definite connection with Alzheimer's and early onset dementia through a Dr. Dale Bredesen, an amazing doctor in America that specializes in Alzheimer's, and has just made the connection with the mycotoxins of mold. So types of mold, a lot of different, so many types of mold. I'm not going to go into the details, but your Aspergillus type, which many people are allergic to if you do basic medical tests. There's quite a few different. The Aspergillus versicolor is that musty type of one. Really irritates the eyes. You got the Chitobium one, which is, yeah, you don't really see that one so much, whereas the Stachybotrys is that black type of mold. And then you've got the Wallemia, which is usually the kind of mold that you can't see. It's in the air, it's in the air conditioning, you wouldn't notice. So you can't assume or think you don't have mold in your house unless you do the appropriate testing, which ERMI testing, which is an environmental relative mold index, which is, you can get a kit. There's a few companies that do it. You can contact me if you want their details. But they will do, like, give you a little swab, you swab it around your house, and they'll do up to 36 types of mold and actually let you know what molds are there, which is really helpful. Sometimes you can have it broken down to a more accurate, these are the particular molds that will affect people's health, so you can see a score of how, I guess, how detrimental your home might be and the environment that you're in. There's another couple of companies, this is another one that goes into a lot more detail and gives you quite a few different emojis of how that could affect your health as well. And if I won't go into a lot of this detail, but there's the mycotoxins that are what get into our system. These can be checked through blood and urine in different tests. There's a few different profiles around the world, and they can actually test to see what mycotoxins you may be exposed to personally and give you a level of how much it is, so you can work out what type of mold it might be. And then there's certain mycotoxins that can be detoxed in certain ways. So that's how well we go right down to the therapeutic level of working out, really honing in on the type of mycotoxins that are affecting you personally. And a lot of different, this is another lab in America, and they have a really good summary. They go through about 20 different mycotoxins. So there's lots of different ones. Aflatoxin is from your Aspergillus type mold. So that's your most common, but there are a lot, and you'd be surprised at how high some of the levels. I've had some patients with some astronomical levels of certain mycotoxins within their system, which is not a surprise as to them not getting well generally. So there's a little bit there of just a sample of that kind of thing. And you can get testing through mycotoxin with quite a few different companies. The different types of mycotoxins, aflatoxin, which is, as I said, was from the Aspergillus group, gliotoxins, again, from different types of Aspergillus, but I do find this is quite common in a lot of patients. And then, yeah, it just goes on. So it just depends on what kind of mold you're exposed to. You may have been exposed to this particular kind of mold years ago in a childhood house, and it just hasn't detoxed because you haven't had the right detox, or the immune system's not been strong enough. Mycotoxins Day. Some people say, hey, you know, I thought it was from my MTHFR genes or something like that. When we are affected by mold, there could be a whole number of contributions or triggers that could be contributing to the whole plethora of your symptoms of what's going on. So it's really a case of looking, there's quite a few things. I'm going to show you my jigsaw template in a little bit, and you'll see how many factors I personally look at into as a naturopath, because why the mold is affecting you as a person is usually because of maybe 10 to 20 other things that we also have to fix up. Where to start? Remove from the mold source, preferably if can. Some people, there's like whole, you know, communities in America that are like a bit mold phobic, and they'll literally leave their house with just their credit card. That's extreme and not doable in a lot of cases. But if you can move, if you're in a moldy house that you're renting, maybe talk to the landlord or try and remove yourself from that particular moldy bedroom or something like that. I would not advise that anyone who has mold illness symptoms to be working or trying to clean up the mold at all. Get the professionals in. You can. They wear their masks, they put screens up, and they'll actually remove the moldy areas of the house, if it walls or something like that. Otherwise, you might need to get away from that mold. Sometimes people find that when they go away camping or they go on a holiday somewhere and then they come back and then they feel ill. So that's like a good sign of, okay, that could be something going on environmentally. Might not be the mold. Some people have other things in the house, asbestosis, dust, other allergies, toxins from within the debris of, renovations and so forth. How to treat it? I like to treat the inflammation first. So anything we can do, I can do for the patient to reduce the inflammation, which means removing inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, common alcohol, so forth. It is better to have a healthier diet, a lot more veggies, so that the gut microbiome can really heal. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the gut microbiome, 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So if our gut is not working well, and our gut microbiome, which consists of 2 kilos of bacteria, we want that in our gut. We want a colony full of all the different tradies, I call it, all doing their jobs. We want 1,500 different types of bacteria, not just 500. We want a whole massive microbial diversity within the gut. And that's something I do a lot of testing for. I do microbiome testing, which is phenomenal stool test, and looks for parasites, inflammatory markers, secretory IgA, which is an immune marker within the gut. And we can see how the gut is affected and how it's affecting the immune system. And a lot of patients I see with mold illness, they have a lot of yeasts, candida. They also have sometimes parasites, a lot of inflammatory markers, and maybe not so much bacterial diversity, and often not enough good bacteria, especially if they've had a history of antibiotics, which many patients do because they may have had asthma when they were younger, or things that were affecting their immune, so they were given antibiotics, and it's this sort of vicious cycle. Always working on the immune system. I always address the adrenals because most of these patients are tired, exhausted, anxious, suffering from inflammation symptoms, even if it's just a skin rash or headaches or brain fog or a bit of a sore throat. These are all inflammatory symptoms, and definitely to detoxify the body as much as possible. And there's a few ways of doing that. It doesn't have to be like a 2-day detox and you're done. It literally needs to be more of a lifetime thing. I like to give a bit of a percentage of 80%. If we can literally be 80% at least, then it gives a bit of leeway if we have a bit of, other lifestyle things we need to do, parties, weddings, whatever. But in the end of the day, if you want to get better, we really need to detox the body as much as possible. I just pop these pictures in just because in the gut, we've got the small, you eat your food in the stomach, goes into the small intestine. We've got 12 meters of small intestine. Well, 90% of our nutrients are absorbed. And then we've got the large intestine. Well, in here, in our intestine, it breaks down into the villi and then the epithelium, where we've got the microvilli. And then the next picture here, this is actually where, like I said, 80% of the immune system happens. These cells, they're the ones they're detoxing, they're replenishing, they're replicating, and they are the ones that send the messages out to the rest of the immune system. So if we are not eating well, and we're eating inflammatory foods that are acidic and toxic and preservatives and yucky things, then our immune system in our gut's not going to work, and we're not going to be able to deal with the mycotoxins, which are the mold toxins. This is an article, if anyone likes to get their nerd on, just about the correlation of mycotoxins in the gut microbiome. I thought this was a really, really interesting article. PubMed, if you ever want to get into looking at the public medicine, it's free. You can look at any sort of science papers, and they're reputable, papers where people have done a lot of research. So the gut microbiome testing, my favorite, love it. I would do this probably more over than the actual mycotoxins test, because this is something that, yes, we're probably going to have mycotoxins if you've been exposed to mold. This is something we can actually really work on. The secretory IgA is a part of the immune system that if that's high, there's going to be inflammation. The immune system of the gut is really striving, so it's not going to be able to work in its best potential. zonulin often can be high if someone's eating a lot of gluten, can lead to leaky gut, or where the permeable membrane is where the toxins from the gut can then go through the blood, the gut barrier into the bloodstream, which then further upsets and compromises the immune system. And then we can get toxins from the gut cross the blood-brain barrier, like I said, causing inflammation in the brain, including mycotoxins. So the gut microbiome testing I do is just gives us a really good amount of information. It also looks at parasites and lots of other liver markers as well. And it gives a whole list of all the bacteria that's in your gut, more than 0.1%. It's very exciting. Okay. And I also, another area that I work on is genetic testing. So I've just studied 4 years of nutrigenomics, which is really interesting to get the finer pieces of the puzzle as to why is this patient being affected by this particular illness, be it tick-borne infections, mold illness, chronic fatigue, neurological symptoms, anxiety, more than other patients. And it comes down to gene variations. And within the gene testing, we can actually see what inflammation markers the person may be more susceptible to. So it's really helpful because then we can hone in. For example, this patient had the gene variations for this TNF alpha inflammation marker. And we know that turmeric and boswellia can actually reduce that and sort of stop that toxic outcome of the inflammatory marker. So the gene testing can be really, really helpful. Also, you can test for whether the person is susceptible to zinc, whether they absorb vitamin D, vitamin C, like celiac, whether they can break down alcohol, lactose, all of the things. So it's very, very exciting to be able to look into the details there. It just helps us with a little bit more information to be able to hone in on the treatment plan. I do a lot of inflammatory marker testing, and I find this is helpful with patients because the normal, if you just get your basic test done, you might just get ESR or C-reactive protein, but often they're low or don't come up as being a problem only in acute time. So if you've got a long-term illness, they might not show up, whereas these markers actually show up in testing. Another lot of testing I love to do just to help with the process is looking at how much heavy metal toxins a person may have in their body. So things like antimony, aluminium, mercury, and that can be really helpful. So then we know what minerals we can use. For example, cadmium, we can use zinc will bind to, and mercury, if they've got too much mercury, we can use selenium, and so forth. We can actually work on and check the minerals as well. This test, the hair analysis test for the mineral status of the patient. There's also environmental toxins that you can get checked, like gliotoxins and glyphosates. But glyphosates are from Roundup, and so lots of plastics and lots of different chemicals that someone may be exposed to. There's lots of different panels we can look at, obviously working out what is the best panel for the patient to choose. And back to hormones with the adrenals. This is a test called the Dutch hormone test that's really helpful for looking at if the person is quite stressed, if their cortisol levels are affecting them, then that's also going to hinder if they have mold illness. Okay, so that's a lot about testing. However, we can get some really good information just from being able to know what types of toxins and chemicals we can deal with, and then we know and how the body's working and how it's dealing with it, so we can really work out a really good treatment protocol. So like I said, remove the person from the mold, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. When I'm looking at treating a patient from a naturopathic perspective, I always go for the most important thing I think is anti-inflammatory. Any inflammation symptoms a patient might be suffering from, like the brain fog, asthma, pain, any joint pain, really work on that. Work on the microcirculation. And these are all actions that as a naturopath, I like to work on. Mitochondrial support, making sure that the energy powerhouses of the cells are functioning well, might need some magnesium, that sort of thing. Of course, antifungal herbs and antimicrobial herbs and antioxidants, and the list goes on, but it's all part of treating the body, helping the body naturally do what it does as well, but also giving it an extra bit of support because it's not been able to deal with it because of whatever underlying triggers. Binding the mycotoxins, that's about getting literally in the blood. We can use certain charcoal, diatomaceous earth, different binders that can actually be used to help get rid of the mycotoxins out of the system. But there's a way of doing it. You don't want to just take charcoal, you'll be constipated for days. There's a way of doing it in with a bit of a detox protocol. Always warming, because often these patients, get the cold, feel the cold quite a lot. Adrenal support, as I mentioned, and immune system support. So I'm going to talk about a few herbs that these are my favorite to go to, and you would have heard of all of them because they're classic and been used for thousands of years. But we have a lot of clinical proven evidence now, just proving its efficacy, and a lot of science research proving that different types of herbs can really hone in on certain mycotoxins and certain parasites and certain bacteria. Turmeric, which is just something I use in liquid form, powder form, I use activated curcumin form. So there's a lot of different ways, but it has a definite antifungal and anti afflugenic, which means the aspergillus type fungus. Cloves you can use to help clean mold as well, or just keep it, but you can add it into herbs and actually have it into diet as well. And it is antimicrobial, antifungal, and so forth. I'll flick through these because you can read these in your own time, but there's a lot of beneficial effects of clove being anti-inflammatory and just really supportive in the antifungal area. Echinacea. Echinacea is one of the most, I'd have to say, the queen of herbs for immune system and adrenals. It's also supportive of the adrenal herbs. It's anti-inflammatory. Anything itis, any inflammation type disorders, echinacea is phenomenal for. I like to use the two types of echinacea, angustifolia and purpurea, and it has been known traditionally the Native American Indians used both types, even though they grew in different areas. Tribes would actually go out of their way to trade. And it's interesting that they do this because to use the echinacea root, you have to dig under quite hard, arid land, a good meter. The root's about 1 meter long, and that's where the alkylamines in, that funny taste it's in the mouth. That's the alkylamines in echinacea. And the tribes used to swap, so they would have both types. They would swap with each other. And then it has been proven, MediHerb have done a lot of work with echinacea, Kerrybone especially, and proven that both the types of echinacea together increase the alkylamines within the solution, which is really good. The alkylamines are the bit that gets straight into the immune system and really work, having these effects that they have. Within half an hour, it's been tested, taken internally and tested within the blood, and we know the alkylamines are getting absorbed, which is phenomenal. I grow echinacea as well. They're very pretty flowers. Ginger, microcircular. I drink ginger every day. I have a flask which is full of warm ginger, turmeric. Sometimes I put lemon or apple cider vinegar, and it's just a beautiful microcirculation stimulating warming drink. It's fantastic for any sort of inflammation generally, but it's also just stimulating and good for the brain focus, concentration, as well as hydrating. But I do add a lot of ginger to any sort of inflammatory type illnesses. Now, thyme, there's a lot of study on thyme, especially lately, proving its efficacy against mycotoxins. So this is something that it's a lot more I want to research into, but I was having a look just recently and I just thought, wow, there's so much more going on. But thyme is a herb we can grow in the garden. I use it in tincture form, really good as a gargle for any inflammation, but particularly antifungal and great for mold illness. So use it in your herb, in your food. I recommend my patients to have a herb garden of thyme, basil, oregano, rosemary, parsley, holy basil, all of those herbs, and just grab like a tablespoon worth, chop it up and add it to your meal. Don't cook with it necessarily if you want the medicinal components of it, but just add it to the food and it will really enhance the medicinal nourishment of that food. Because back in the day, we would have been wildcrafting, looking and collecting food and plants that have that real bitter taste. These days, lettuce, tomato, and cucumber, they don't do it. So we are missing out on vital phytonutrients in our diet that we need. And these are the antimicrobial, antifungal, antiparasitic foods that we have in abundance around us that we need to incorporate. Otherwise, our gut microbiome is not happy and things get out of balance and so forth. So bring time into your life as much as possible. This was an interesting study as well that I found just recently. Again, how it's time is really sort of inhibiting the mycotoxin properties, which is awesome. There's a lot, I've put quite a bit about thyme because it's just such a fantastic herb, and it does reduce that TNF alpha, which is one of the inflammatory markers that are very commonly high in patients with mold illness. So these are things that we really need to work on. And it also increases interleukin-10, which is a good anti-inflammatory that we want. So we know that thyme does this. Rosemary, another one, similar type of properties, but different. Rosemary is also very, very good for brain health, focus, concentration, memory. It also works on phase 2 of the detox process. So it's really good for liver. Again, just you can add it to your food. Yes, you could cook with it with lamb and so forth, but add it extra as a bit of raw food. It's quite chunky to be eating, and a bit in your mouth, but you're getting the antimicrobial, antifungal properties from it. Also, those studies before were just showing it's very antibacterial against staphylococcus, that kind of thing as well. So a lot of patients with mold illness have a thing called marcons, which is like a staphylococcus that can get right in the nose, and that can be quite tricky to treat. So yeah, things like rosemary and certain herbs can be helpful there. Myrrh is one of the herbs that was given to baby Jesus. Amazing medicine, antibacterial, antifungal, and definitely this one study shows that it can reduce histamine when people get reactive to certain foods and inflammation in that way. Chamomile is a herb I use so much. I use it, I use the liquid herbs mainly, but chamomile is a mix that I'll put in most mixes. It's anti-inflammatory. It's got apigenin in it, which is really good for anxiety and depression, and just generally it's just a nice calming anti-inflammatory herb. And I was a bit excited when I went back to Cornwall a few years ago without realizing it. The beautiful flowers I used to see on the headland where I'm from in Newquay are in fact chamomile, which is one of my most used herbs. I was very, very excited, and that's my hometown there, Cornwall. It grows all around Europe wildly. When I'm making up herbs, I like to do a bit of a mix. So working on the adrenals, the immune, nervous system, liver and gut, and we put it all in a nice concoctions that everything's supported. So we know what, we put something in together that's going to address quite a few things. There's a few little herb formulas that I might use, just adrenal herbs, echinacea, withania, rhodiola. Tinospora, I've been using a lot more of, Romania, astragalus. They're all herbs that can help with the immune system. And definitely been using a lot of shiitake, lion's mane, and the reishi mushroom tinctures. Phenomenal. There's so much new research out there just showing the efficacy of these amazing foods on the immune system, adrenals, and yeah, it's just a big area now. So definitely I would highly recommend getting into your mushrooms. Lung support, just generally making sure that the lungs, the bronchioles, everything's breathing freely and everything's open and clear. And these herbs, even licorice, can be really helpful for that. One of the biggest symptoms I mentioned with mold illness is brain inflammation. And that can just be feeling brain fog, walk into a room, forget what you're looking for, forget what you're saying, just not being able to think, or almost some people who have those ADHD type symptoms, they just can't focus and concentrate. These herbs are phenomenal, like can be game changing to just put that bit of focus, just that concentration back into your head. Really good by working on the inflammation and the toxins. This one's saying I'm looking like a broccoli, and this one's saying I'm looking like a brain, and walnuts are good for the brain. And there we go. We won't see about that one. Okay. Natural binders. So these are the substances that I said that are used within treatment for binding to the mycotoxins in the body, because they can often be in the circulation and they don't get out. We need to literally do a detox program and also use certain binders. Nutrients that I use, nutritional supplements, and I would highly recommend that you do see a naturopath professionally to get the right sort, because there's a lot of not so good stuff out there on the market. You want good quality products. Vitamin C, I take every day, every single day, have done for 20 odd years. I'm 52 and I feel fantastic. N-acetylcysteine really supports the liver. B vitamins, I take a good multi every single day. Vitamin B12, a lot of patients that have these types of sensitivities have those MTHFR type gene mutations, which means their methylation of the liver is a bit compromised, and so they need a little bit of extra support with folate, activated B vitamins, and vitamin B12. And that can be a game changer just in some people, just as a pick me up and just to help boost their immune system. Magnesium is used in over 300 biochemical pathways within the body, but generally for energy, relaxing the muscle, just helping concentration, helps sleep. It's one of the key nutrients for the mitochondria of the cells within the cells, the little ND powerhouses inside of the cells. Zinc, selenium, great antioxidants to help get rid of the mycotoxins of mold. Fish oils, I take a good amount of fish oils. I think it makes my skin feel fantastic. I feel I've got no joint problems. I have, brain, very, very good brain activity. Fish oils are really, really helpful for general inflammation, but they also coat the myelin sheath around the nerves. So it's really good for MS prevention and so forth, but really good for nervous system too. Choline is another one that I use fish oils with. Choline that helps with the brain focus, concentration, just further enhances detoxing and inflammation. So I've put some foods down. I mean, you're not going to be able to avoid mycotoxins in all food, by the way. You just are not, because it's everywhere. So peanuts and nuts and seeds and corn and vegetables, everything is going to have some kind of mycotoxin amount in them. So it's like when people have water from tank water and they're like, how can I filter my water from my tank and not get parasites? Well, you can't really, because there's so many new parasites coming in. But what we can do to avoid getting affected by the mycotoxins and the parasites and so forth is do all the anti-inflammatory detox support, as I've mentioned, the antimicrobial, antifungal type of activities, but also avoid certain foods, because these ones, if you particularly mycotoxic affected, then moldy foods, and then ones that have been around. So you want to have foods that are as fresh as possible. Sugar will just feed mold generally. Any dairy, of ice cream is probably one of the worst. And also we want to avoid these foods because they're inflammatory and mucus forming. Wheat and gluten is not going to help anyone. It's not there's not really benefits of it. So you're better off gluten-free. I recommend we be as much gluten-free as possible, whether you have the celiac genes or not. Leftover food will actually grow a lot of mold overnight. Even something like rice. I saw a documentary once and it just said rice overnight, and just how much, because it's a carbohydrate, sugar, and the mold love it, how much mold would grow on it. You're not going to see it, but it does grow a lot of extra. So people who have candida and yeast problems, I would definitely recommend not having leftover food. Takeaways included, processed meats, that sort of thing. Sometimes they might feel like the yummy foods, but everything in moderation. The foods that I do recommend, any vegetable in that's fresh, organic meats if possible, fresh nuts and beans and legumes if possible, fresh salad leaves and so forth. And the herbs that I mentioned, if you can grow herbs in your garden, highly recommended, even just like in a little, in those little pots that you can have. I've had patients just with a wheelbarrow, they put the herbs in a wheelbarrow, they can move it around in and out the sun as needed, and it's their little herb garden. Herbal teas, green tea, fennel, chamomile and rosehip are particularly good for patients with mold illness or those types of symptoms. And as I mentioned, there will be mycotoxins, but if your immune system's strong and you're on top of the inflammation and your adrenals are looked after and you're not stressed, your body will be able to deal with all of these things. That's a recipe for my bone broth that I highly recommend. I make a bone broth every couple of weeks. I pop it in jars in the fridge and then I put it in the freezer. And yeah, you can use it for all sorts of things, but that's a recipe there if you feel to do that. I highly recommend it. The bone broths, especially if you get nice organic bones, can be really helpful for healing the microbiome, layers, and just general immune, especially putting some shiitake mushrooms and ginger and garlic. And this is my jigsaw, just a sample of when I do see patients. This is not to overwhelm you, but it is the kind of typical thing that I see with a patient that might be querying whether they have mold illness, but often it's not just the mold. There are other things, so many things. There's genetic stuff, there's food intolerance, is there possibly deficiencies? We all have it. And upon testing, the more testing you do, the more you find. But it does mean you can hone in on the things that may be compromising your immune system to the point where the mold is affecting you, or the parasites are affecting you, or those sorts of things. So there's a lot of things that after we look at, that's my job, or a naturopath's job, not your job as a patient, but it's just stuff to be mindful of, that it's never just one thing and everything can contribute. It's like all the things it's good to look at it all and sort of make everything into balance and be as healthy as we possibly can. Other things that can help with mold illness and any sort of, these chemical sensitivities and things like that, and detox, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, some amazing formulas that I'd recommend. Go and see a traditional medicine practitioner, get all your tongue and all the pulse checked and everything, see your constitution, aromatherapy, infrared saunas, hydrotherapy, massage, gentle life put. We don't want to stimulate too many detox. Make sure you drink lots of fluid afterwards, stretching, yoga, meditation and breathing. Even walking out in nature, I think is just so important. Like how the Japanese do, they walk out in the forest bathing. There might be some mold in the forest, so don't quote me on that, but just on a sunny day, get out there, breathe in the air, just be in nature, be in the wildlife, get some sun on you. It's 15 minutes in the morning, just get out into nature as much as possible. Avoid the moldy areas. So if you have a studio that's been flooded or wet, don't be working down there. It really makes a big difference. I was doing some webinars actually on mold illness. Ironically, in the south of France, I was traveling and I was doing the webinars internationally, and I had to go into this cellar to present this webinar. And it was moldy. It was the only place that was near the guy's internet modem. And just sitting in that cellar for a day doing these webinars, I had a cough for about 3 weeks. So it was just enough to trigger my childhood asthma, which I've not had since I've moved to Australia. But in England, in that cold, damp feeling, I do get that kind of asthma. Haven't had it for years, so I know it's mold affected. Sometimes you can just smell it. Open the windows, air things. Air, like clothes, we wear sometimes damp clothes. It's not good to have that. It's not good to go outside with wet hair. It's not just an old wives' tale. In Chinese medicine, if you have wet hair, your immune system will be compromised and you'll likely catch a cold. You're not catching it externally, but the wind weakens the immune system, and then whatever pathogens we have in us, which we have an abundance of, viruses, bacteria, we die with 5% more DNA from viruses than what we were born with. And that's okay and normal and healthy. But when they are pathogenic, I think 10% of people have a meningococcal meningitis bacteria in their nasal cavities. But it's when there's an immune problem and that person with the right gene picture and the toxins, and they get cold or run down, that's when things start affecting from the pathogens. So keep your clothes dry. Don't be running out in the rain, and if you do get yourself dry quickly. Walking around barefoot on cold floors isn't helpful either, or wet shoes or that kind of thing. Make sure your bedding's dry. Dry body brushing is great before you get into the shower. It's one of the best ways of detoxing. I'm a beauty therapist by trade many years ago, and the skin, the best way is the biggest channel of elimination is through the skin. So dry body brushing, and you can get them with a stick, and you put it on your back, and you can put it all in a circular movement towards the heart before you get into the shower, is a beautiful detox treatment. It's done in Japan and a lot of Asian countries and Turkey. They scrub themselves, and you get in there because you're detoxing. As I said, be out in the fresh air as much as possible, and have a mold sabbatical if you can, which means you go off camping somewhere nice, somewhere get some fresh air away from your stagnant moldy space if that's what's happening. Conclusion: check your past exposure to mold as well. Some people don't realize that the house they lived in 5 years ago could be contributing to their current health because of the mycotoxins, as well as all the other things mentioned on the possible jigsaw puzzle. But the mold exposure, if it isn't dealt with, it doesn't go away. And no matter how you can it just stays in then, the mycotoxins. So it depends on how healthy you are, whether it affects you, and what other factors come into your life that may affect your health. I like to think about treating the most debilitating symptoms first, be it the tiredness or the pain or the brain fog. But at the same time, we need to work on the body as a whole, obviously the gut as well. I like to start with minimum doses when I'm prescribing, because some people get a Herxing reaction, which is like a die-off from bacteria, pathogens, and even mycotoxins. I like to pulse herbs as a bit of a way of prescribing herbs that work really well so your body doesn't get used to certain things. I love to be working with GPs, with your specialist, making sure we get all the right testing done, we're all on the same page, and work out a comprehensive program, do the functional medicine tests that are appropriate, and have faith that you can heal your body. You can get over all of these things. It's just working out where you need to, and getting a good program on board. So that's if anyone has any more questions, they can contact me. I'm going to have a little question session in a minute. This is a book that I've written on Lyme disease and mold illness. It's lots of stuff about mold illness, all the herbs I use. So yeah, that's a book. It's got lots of information on it. You can get it through my website, or just contact me and I'll post it out. Got lots of recipes on my website. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I put lots of things about workshops and stuff. And if anyone wants any appointments or mentoring, you can book online or just contact me. And I would like to say thank you to ATMS and to, I clicked onto a link now, and to all of you. And thank you for my patients as well, who literally have been my biggest teachers and been really awesome. And I love my work very, very much. Thank you.
Amazing, Amina. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. And I think what I like to reiterate is that you're saying, work with your naturopath, your accredited practitioner, your nutritionist. It's so important to be working with somebody as well. So if anyone's got any questions, let's see if there are any questions. I actually did have a question. I might start to ask that while other people might be typing. I saw in your bone broth recipe you had mushrooms. So anyone with mold illness, are they able to eat mushrooms? Is it okay?
Yes, they are. It's a funny thing, it is, but mushrooms are so good for the immune system. If the mushroom is moldy itself and got mold on it and it's all mushy, don't eat it. But just fresh mushrooms, absolutely. It's like people say, so I saw some studies digging in the hole of research. It's like, there were mycotoxins on turmeric. But turmeric also is great for healing mycotoxins and inflammation. I mean, you can get bacteria in alcohol, but alcohol will also clean up bacteria. It's everything in moderation. We're all exposed to bacteria, pathogens, mold, mycotoxins everywhere. So it's just about having everything in balance. And as fresh as possible, the mushrooms. I'm a big fan of mushrooms. Go for it.
Amazing. And I think we've got another question here from Jess. Do air purifiers work in helping to control mold?
Yes, that's a really good point. Thank you very much. Yes, some people find that really useful. If you're in more of a closed up area, then definitely that's a good point. I'm in Queensland, so I'm all open with all the windows kind of thing. But if you have an air purifier, that can work if it's a good quality one. I can't recommend a particular good one, but yeah.
And so do you also recommend people with, someone's also recommended, do you use ionizers?
I don't, but I have heard they're really good. It's just not something that I personally use. But look, there's if you find that's something that works, I just do the research in getting the right kind of ionizer. But yeah, I can't really comment, but I think that might help.
Amazing. And with the herbs you were recommending too, I think like that thyme and rosemary. So a lot of people could, they want to bring this into the cooking, but maybe teas. I know you did mention teas, but that's a nice, easy way for people to bring these types of herbs into their daily life every day.
Yeah, they can. And I would be more picking the fresh herbs that they have in their garden. Like, it's so easy to grow thyme, rosemary, or oregano. You can literally have it in a pot. You could go and buy a pot at Bunnings and have it, So I would recommend fresh as much as possible. Yes.
Mhm. Excellent. Has anybody else got any other questions they want to type in the chat function, please, for Amina? Well, we've got Amina here for a few more minutes. Be really good to see. Oh, does the efficacy of the herbs deteriorate while cooking? So if you're using those herbs in cooking.
I would, yes, I believe that some of it would. So I would always use, because some of the essential oils of herbs, like in thyme and rosemary, may be spoiled with because they're very volatile upon heat. So that's why I always recommend use them in cooking for sure to get the nice flavors when you're cooking lamb or whatever. But I would definitely add the chopped fresh herbs to your meal as like a sprinkle, and therefore it's just getting used to it. Our tongue, our receptor, we're not used to those bitter tastes as much as what we used to be many years ago back in the day. So it's just getting used to it again. And they're quite strong and pungent, but they're so good for you. And you'll feel it in your system just working on a, much more of a therapeutic level. So I would definitely go fresh. Use it in cooking for the flavor, but I would definitely go the fresh or herbal tinctures that have been properly prepared. They're very concentrated, so that's what I use as well.
Mm. Someone's just saying here they missed some of the natural binders to remove mold aside from diamococin earth. I can't probably get that wrong, sorry.
Yeah.
What are the others that you recommended?
Look, charcoal. People use different ones: charcoal, chlorella, diatomaceous earth, bentonite clay, pectin from apples. There's quite a few. And I would use it within a bit of a detox protocol. So they're having detox herbs at the same time and eating well and having plenty of fluid and making sure that they have good amounts of essential fatty acids, fish oils, and magnesium, because you don't want to be getting constipated. Like you want to have it all balanced out. So in the right levels, yeah.
And do you recommend anybody doing like the nasal flushes or the sprays, the natural saline sprays, especially if the sinuses, to flush anything out through the bacteria?
I would. It's not something I do or would have or can really comment on. But look, if it's people have been doing it for years. If it works, it works. But if it works for you, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. I can't comment much more on that. Sorry.
Excellent. Do you recommend diffusers? So maybe oil diffusers?
Yeah, they can be really, really helpful as well. Like so peppermint and even clove oil, eucalyptus, those types of oil can definitely help for sure. I love the essential oils. Yeah, if you have an oil burner and you feel to do that, or even just a couple of drops on the pillow or something like that, lavender, yeah, can be really, really helpful. Just I wouldn't note, do not take the essential oils internally, because some people are like, oh, oregano, or like, cinnamon or whatever. Not a good idea, not recommended at all, because it can actually really burn the esophagus and really harm the stomach. So those essential oils are awesome, but the only way I would use them would be like oregano. I use a special enteric coated tablet that makes sure it's absorbed where it's meant to and broken down without causing damage. So, but the essential oils can be used as a burner, can be used on the skin, obviously in the right medium, diluted, and eaten within foods is fine.
Amazing. Thank you. I think we haven't got any more questions at this stage. And I'd just like to share, we do have a few more events or webinars, I should say, this week for the month of natural medicine, which is May. So this is the home stretch. And I think this has been an amazing webinar. I'm a bit scared of mold. I don't know who everyone else is, but maybe I think you need to be empowered to really take control and go see an accredited practitioner and to get that support. So thank you so much for sharing this with us today. It's been amazing.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for joining us today for our Natural Medicine Week webinar. Bye.